it's too hard.
Well, they really push you. They like do these tricky things to make it so you can't do anything unless you spend money, and so it becomes this like grind of like selling everything you have in order to get enough.
Oh, that's so unfortunate.
It's really
Stop
frustrating.
talking about Farmville.
The travesty of Farmville. I said we're changing today's show. It's going to be about Farmville.
No,
never. Hi, everyone tuning in. This is Close to the Metal. This is our weekly show where we talk about computing and we go in depth with a particular topic. I'm Greg Nibbler, your host, and today we are talking about the new MacBooks. So there's a lot of things that are out there, a lot of things being said about them as people are getting their hands on these. And one of the main issues is how fast they are. So we're going to hopefully dive into this. We're going to kind of go through the details, the hardware. We want to take your questions. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, please feel free to hop in there into the chat and give us your questions as we go through, your opinions. I've seen a lot of opinions from a lot of people on articles that we've posted so far. Everybody is pretty sure they know the answer. So go ahead and put that in there. Let us know, and we will get through those. I've been called a couple of things, I think, on DT Daily already because of opinions on the MacBook. But we want to hear them, so please post those in there. Let's introduce our cast, as usual, to my right.
Brad Burke.
Matt Smith.
And Matt Smith. All right, so the new MacBook. So the MacBook Pro 13 and 15. This is the first time in, 14 years? Or 14?
Yeah,
4
I
years.
think
4
it was
years.
about 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah.
It's been 100 years. Like
I think
the
the
Cubs.
last one looked like a clam. Was the last one they made?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Really colorful. And
Yeah, the abacus was amazing, though, that they had on it. So, all right, so yeah, first time in about 4 years that we've had a solid update to this.
Yeah, so if you want to call it like a redesign, like a complete redesign of the system, then I think it's been 4 years. Because
Okay.
I think the last one was early 2012
Okay.
when the MacBook Pro with Retina came out. Could be a little wrong about that, but
So,
around
and,
that time frame.
and in the meantime, we've had a lot of other, especially Microsoft in particular, seems to have caught up in a lot of ways, if not surpassed in some things. So we're going to kind of get into, though, more about what the MacBook has done, what we've got on this. There is the new Touch Bar. I don't think we're really going to touch on the Touch Bar, to really use a terrible pun there. But they did have the Touch Bar. That was kind of the big flashy addition.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still not that sold on it. I mean, I guess that's all right to have a couple of shortcut buttons.
I mean, let's talk about the Touch Bar real quick.
Okay.
Just to
get it out of the way.
Some of the specs on it too.
Okay.
So it's Retina caliber display. I don't remember the exact resolution. I think it was like 2480 by 40 by 96, something along those lines. Basically, the idea is it's going to be high enough pixel resolution. You're not really going to see pixelation on what's displayed on it. It's running watchOS variant, apparently, which is interesting. And it's running that off of a chip that's in the bar. And it's also got that chip for Touch ID.
Okay.
So it's kind of an interesting bit of engineering. But it's really interesting that it's like running watchOS variant, apparently, rather than just running right off macOS. I think that probably has its pros and cons. Probably it will lead to smoother performance on the Touch Bar, I would think.
Yeah.
Because, if it was running right off macOS, anything that was kind of jogging your computer would also
be affected by that. Yeah, or affect that.
Jog that Touch Bar. And that might be a little jarring. So it's pretty interesting. Whether or not people will use it, I think that's still, like these haven't even shipped yet, so.
Yeah, so it's hard to say exactly what the populace is going to think of these.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen the reviews so far seem to be people actually really like it. I think it was Mallory from Digital Trends did a review, and she seemed, but my impression was that she liked the Touch Bar. Thought it was good, but I don't know, Brad.
Well, I think there's a difference between like picking up a laptop on a shelf at a hands-on event and like spending a few minutes with it and saying like, oh, this objectively works well. But it's a different story than like whether you'll actually use it in your day-to-day.
Sure.
Because I think, like from a high level, I think, to put it on something like the MacBook where you have people who aren't too familiar with what they're doing in computing, to have those buttons really clearly say this is what this button does is better than for people who tend to buy MacBook Pros kind of have a little more understanding of how their system works. And for them, those hotkeys disappearing might be kind of frustrating.
That's true. Okay, well, so there's a little bit about the Touch Bar, and that addition to it. We're going to get into some other details, though, on the MacBook. Any final thoughts on the Touch Bar before we move on? It's there.
We'll have to use it for a while.
Before we can really know.
really know how good it is.
One thing we can talk about, though, is the internal workings of these new MacBooks and talking about the speed of them. So why don't we get into it first? I believe we want to get to the processors and talk about what we're working with here with the Pro 13 and 15. Matt, do you want to lead us here through?
Sure. So the big news and a bit of a disappointment, I think, is that it's using 6th generation Intel Core processors.
Which seems weird to me.
Whereas the 7th generation was announced on I think it was August 30th, and there are systems shipping with 7th generation Intel Core processors.
But not these MacBooks.
Now, there is a reason for that. And the reason for that is Apple likes to use Iris graphics, Intel Iris graphics, on their Macs. It's a little faster than Intel HD, so I guess that's good. I'm not really sure what the exact point of that is, to be honest.
Why they want to use the Iris?
Yeah, because I think, they kind of did this with when Retina was coming out, and I think the idea then was, like, you need this to the power of the high-resolution display. But now, like, Intel HD graphics, it powers a lot of high-resolution displays on Windows, seems to do it fine. So I'm not really sure what the thinking is there.
The only thing I could think of is that they were really pushing 5K. And that
Yeah,
I don't know if an HD
they're probably the only ones that do
600
5K.
could do
I'm pretty sure
5K output.
I'm pretty sure like an Intel HD 620, which is a very common integrated graphics variant, I don't think that does 5K.
No, I don't think so.
So yeah, that
So
could
maybe
be
that's
that
it?
could be a reason.
It does seem definitely weird. I mean, why go to? I mean, if you're putting out this brand new system, why go? Why use something that's not absolutely brand new when it comes down to the graphics or to the processor? Excuse me.
Yeah, and it definitely has some impact on the performance. We haven't tested the MacBook Pro with Touch Bar or the MacBook Pro without it. There's just now starting to be some reviews out of the MacBook Pro without the Touch Bar, but we're very aware of what the processors are, so we can get an idea of how well they perform. Now, so if you get the one without the Touch Bar, that one that's $1,500, the MacBook Pro 13 without Touch Bar, that's going to be Core i5 6360U is what it's looking like. Now, Apple, as usual, they're not saying that they have this or that processor, but if you look at the specs they quote and you compare them to the Intel data sheet, you can see,
Okay,
that's
kind
the
of
one.
work backwards and figure out what it is.
Yeah, so that got tested in Geekbench, and they tested it with a multi-core score of 6970, and that's in Geekbench 4. Okay, so we have been testing Core i5 and Core i7 systems with 7th generation Intel processors, and they tend to be faster than that.
Okay.
They tend to be over 7,000, so not a lot faster, but they do tend to be faster than that. Now this Core i5 6360U, that is I'd say it's a fairly high-end version of Core i5.
Okay.
So it's not like it's a slow processor, but I think you definitely see that when you look at the benchmark scores, you definitely see that it's at a bit of a disadvantage compared to a 7th generation.
Especially if you're paying $1,500, and this is the base model without the OLED Touch Bar. That seems, I mean, I just kind of find that a little bit surprising that they don't go for something a little bit higher for that price. But maybe I'm wrong on that, Brad.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of that's a sticking point I think that we've been seeing, especially as we've been working on our comparisons, our specification comparisons with other systems, where we're looking at this and that edge that they used to have, where you'd say like which we'll get to the fact that they used to have higher wattage processors in all their models.
Yeah.
That it's dragging and it's starting to show.
But the price is not.
No.
Comparatively. Okay, so we're looking at that. So the i5, that's the Intel Core i5 6360U processor for that.
And so that's the one you're going to get in the base model.
Okay.
Now, if you get the one with the Touch Bar, you get a processor upgrade to Core i5 6267U is what it looks like. Now, that is a lower number than 6360U, I know, but actually it has higher clock speeds, turbo boost clock speeds, and it is a higher wattage processor, and it has faster graphics. So don't ask me why that is.
Why is the number lower, though?
I was looking at that and finding it very confusing. But, the thing that's key about this is that it's a 28-watt thermal design power processor. So basically, it's designed with the idea that it's going to consume more power than the processors that are in most laptops. They tend to be a thermal design power of 15 watts.
Okay, yeah, that's quoted. A lot more than.
So that's almost double. Now that doesn't mean you're going to get double the performance, but in the past, this has been something Apple has done to give the MacBook Pro 13 an edge.
Okay.
Because it would have this higher wattage processor that's a little bit quicker, and as a result, it would often be one of the quickest, if not the quickest, dual-core laptop around. But because they're on 6th generation, that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case anymore. Geekbench scores for Geekbench 4, multi-core scores are generally around 7,300 to 7,500 for this processor and other laptops.
Okay.
And I don't expect that it's going to be much quicker than that in Apple's because, I don't know what they could do.
Would make it, yeah.
You can't overclock it. So that is actually behind some of the scores we have seen from Core i7 7th generation processors that are 15 watts. So they have gotten up to, at maximum, the high 7,000s. So, it's not going to be necessarily an advantage anymore because what they have in the wattage, they are giving up and having the older processor architecture and their laptop.
Okay. Which still, again, just seems like a strange move, other than working with these graphics as we were talking about. And again, if you're watching live, please feel free to put in your questions. Let us know what you want to talk about. If you have comments, anything along those lines, we'll get to those as we go through. Yeah, so it's a 28 watt, so almost double that compared to what the standard would be.
Yeah, for the thermal design power.
For that.
So, it's not really an ideal situation for the MacBook Pro, just because I think people expect them to be like the quickest because of the price and because of the MacBook Pro legacy. It doesn't really look like it's going to be the case. And especially since they just updated it, I think that's definitely something that's been getting a lot of negative feedback.
Yeah, because you expect Mac to come in and make a big splash. If they're finally doing this, everybody's waited for years, and now this is what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
Right. Did you have a thought on that?
No, I agree completely.
Okay. All right, good. I think we're all on the same board there.
Yeah.
All right, so anything more about the processors that we want to get into before we move on?
No, that's about it for the processors.
Okay. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in there. We can always go back and answer those if you have some more processor questions. Let's talk about some more of the internals, the solid-state drive performance.
This is an area we can be a little more positive.
Okay. We can change the tune.
Yeah.
All right, so MacBooks with the solid-state drive. Let's go into these. Who wants to lead that? Matt, do you want to go in again? Brad?
Sure.
Okay.
So we were talking about this the other day that Apple has sort of initially led this charge to faster hard drives, PCIe hard drives, in their laptops, and it's something that's becoming increasingly common now in other systems. But Apple tends to still have an advantage here. And part of that is that they use their own, at least in this case, they're using their own type of connection. So we talked about SSDs a couple weeks ago, and we talked about how there's different, types of connections. You got your M2 or your PCIe over PCIe connection, which is what a lot of laptops use. You get this little, they call it like a gum stick, I guess, drive, and it's nice and compact, and it fits in this little slot. And when they broke down the new MacBook, they found that inside there was this new Apple connector that's sort of like two little bars, and it fits in, and it's removable, but only swappable with other hard drives that Apple makes for this computer.
That is such an Apple thing to do.
So,
yeah.
The advantage is you get really high write and read speeds, on the order of another 25 to 50% what we see out of high-end NVMe drives. Yeah, and there's a picture of the connector, and you can see they don't know whether this is a connection that this is the first time we've seen it. We don't know whether other companies are going to make them or if Apple's going to make them readily available. So it's just a sort of wait and see. But it is removable. So at some point you'll be able to upgrade it if you need to.
That's kind of a cool feature.
Yeah. So what it is it's PCI Express NVMe drive. But what sets it apart is that it's using... So Apple has its own hard drive controller. And like they're getting in there, just like they make their own iPhone chips. Like they're getting in there and doing stuff with the hard drive chips. I believe we saw this first on the MacBook, the 12-inch one. So this isn't like new for the MacBook Pro redesign, but it is definitely an advantage. And so read speeds, 3.1 gigabytes per second is what they're quoting. Write speeds, 2.1 gigabytes per second. So that's a lot of data. Like if you have a mechanical hard drive, that does like 150 megabytes per second.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have, in the last 3 years you bought a SATA SSD, that does like 400 to 500 megabytes per second.
So this is ridiculous.
Right.
A complete redesign.
Now, like we have some Windows laptops and desktops now that have PCIe NVMe drives, and they can go up to, oftentimes we see about 1.5 gigabytes per second, sometimes up to 2 gigabytes per second on reads, and usually the writes are a little lower. But still, like that's definitely one area where Apple is kind of blowing it out of the park. And this has been true on all their products. Like if you look at iPad, you look at iPhone, and you look at Mac, like the storage performance on all of these tends to be very much in excess of any competitor in their space.
So this is fun. This is definitely somewhere where they have improved quite a bit. I mean, that's pretty incredible. So it's almost at minimum twice as fast as one of the fastest at minimum. Maybe a little bit less than that. And it's removable, so you can change it out.
If they sell it.
If they do.
That's
yeah,
kind of the big question. Because
possibly removable.
Apple hasn't said, and people are like, are they going to sell like an upgrade? Is it going to be something where they kind of do it, but you have to ask Apple service?
So you might be able to take it out, but we don't know if there's anything to put back in it.
At the very least, if your friend has one, you could like trade hard drives.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty good bet they're not going to like just put these on the Apple Store. So like,
I don't know. They do actually. You can buy SODIMM RAM from them for
really,
like
can you?
for like 3 times what it costs normally, and it's just a slow version of
Yeah.
But
So
that's the point.
what is it that's making this speed possible? I guess it's just that's their
It's that
their
custom
proprietary
chip.
system. Yeah. What they've come up with.
And this is the feature. Like this is one of the features where the Pro does live up to its name, I think, because professional photographers, and
Video editors.
yeah, and anyone that's working with large files, like when you're opening those and moving those, like that can be a serious pinch point in your process of working.
Right.
Because I mean, like
You're having to
if
wait
you've
to
got files
drag
that
and drop something that's going to take. Yeah.
like a 4K video file can get into hundreds of, megs, hundreds. I don't know about hundreds of gigs, but
It can
they
be a
can get
lot.
into
It's a
multi-gigabyte.
lot, yeah.
Like levels. And like that, if you've got a drive that's transferring, 300 and 400 megabytes per second in the best case scenario, which usually you don't quite get that best case scenario speed, like that can end up taking a while. It can be something that actually slows down saving a file or encoding a file if your hard drive's not quite on the same level as all your other components.
So definitely they've made an upgrade there that is a sizable, that's an impressive upgrade that we've got on that. So far the processors using, the older processors, just to kind of recap what we've talked about so far. Now we've got the solid state drive, which is pretty impressive. We'll see if it's, removable, if you can do anything with it or not, if you can change it out. Let's go on to graphics performance. Should we move on to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the graphics on it. So right now it looks like it's relying on Radeon, let's see, from what you've got here, 450, 455, and 460 Pro graphics.
In the larger upgraded MacBook Pro 15 only.
Yeah.
So what do we get for the base level?
That's the Iris.
That's the Iris
Yeah,
one.
so that's the integrated graphics. And Iris is good. I wouldn't say it's good for high resolution screens, but I think we've even found that it's not, none of the Intel integrated chips are really gaming quality.
Especially not on a Mac.
No.
Where you've already got problems. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But so the Iris, like I said earlier, I'm not really clear on why Apple is quite so happy on that, other than potentially the 5K support, because it's just not quick enough to be like, oh wow, yeah, I'm so glad I have that.
The only reason I say
I feel like
yeah.
there might be some edge case where I'm wrong about that, but like generally speaking,
Yeah,
it's not amazing. But the Radeons, they're more interesting because they were actually they were kind of announced like in conjunction with the MacBook Pro 15 reveal. We didn't know about them until then, and I also believe it's the first time we've seen that Polaris architecture in laptops.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, Brad?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a few shows ago, we talked about the Radeon 480.
Yep.
We had a podcast about that.
Which you can find
And
in
that's come up
iTunes and
multiple
Stitcher, all
times.
kinds
Yeah.
of places.
So that is AMD's new graphics architecture, and it came out in the desktop video cards. We hadn't seen it in any laptops yet, and the MacBook Pro 15 looks like it's the first laptop to have it, which is it is interesting. It's good to see AMD start to show up in mobile graphics in some capacity. I mean, I guess they were in previous MacBooks, but that was a really old chip.
Yeah.
It's good to see this new architecture come out.
Okay, so we got the new architecture for these. So what do you think that's going to translate to, like compared to the high end Microsoft computers?
I mean, we really don't know. I will say that most high end gaming desktops now are featuring 10 series chips, and all of the 10 series mobile chips, we haven't seen a mobile 1050, but the mobile 1060 is much, much, much faster than the 460. That being said, the 460 does decently at 1080p gaming.
Yeah.
The desktop version of it, at least, holds up pretty well in terms of newer games, high settings, 60 frames per second. So you won't be able to do anything at native resolution maybe on your MacBook, but if you get the MacBook Pro 15 and you boot camp into Windows, you might be able to do a little bit of light Counter-Strike or something.
Okay, that was actually one of the questions they had if we've done any gaming testing on it.
Well, we haven't. We don't have one.
Yeah. So when that happens, we'll
It's
definitely
it
do
is
that.
not out yet. The MacBook Pro 15, that's shipping next week or two. We don't have a review of that yet. I don't think anyone does, to be honest.
No, I've only seen the 13 without a touch bar.
But can't say that for absolute certain.
Okay.
But anyway, as far as the performance goes, so AMD did come out with peak performance rating measured in T-flops, and so the Radeon Pro 460 said 1.8 T-flops, and so that is compared to, let's say, a GTX 1060 mobile, that is 3.5 is what they're quoting as the peak compute power. So that's pretty big difference. It looks like this Radeon Pro is probably slower than like a GTX 970M. It's probably more on par with like a GTX 1050 desktop card. I don't remember what the rating was on that exactly.
Okay.
And there's a lot of like these ratings are kind of like
a little subjective.
Yeah, like.
Well, teraflops is a calculated value based off of
There can
a
be
number
different
of
tests used to achieve
Okay.
it. But from what I'm seeing of the amount of compute units on this stream processors, the amount of RAM they put on it, it looks like that's kind of what I would expect. It's
Okay.
in the range. And it's important that these come out as a Radeon Pro. Okay? So that right away tells you that this is not put in the MacBook with any real intent to game. It can game, like if you have a 3D game, that is Mac compatible. This is probably about one of the fastest configurations you can get outside of maybe a Mac Pro. Although I don't know the last time they updated that system.
Yeah.
But like that's not really the point.
Yeah.
That's
Gaming
not why
is
this
not
is
the
here.
not the focus.
Like the focus is for professional applications that can take advantage of GPU compute sort of stuff, and that's really why it's been put in here. So like these MacBook Pro 15s, the Radeon Pro 460, 455, 450, they're cool. It's good that they're in there. It'll be a big upgrade over what was in there before, but like it's not like this isn't a gaming system, and
Yeah,
so
if that's what you're looking
that is
for,
what it
this
is.
is not the computer probably for you.
Yeah.
In that
And
aspect.
like that sort of leads over an issue with the Mac in general right now for entertainment is that it's not Apple's not really doing much to support gaming on the Mac. Besides the fact that we don't really have good gaming hardware available anyway, OpenGL support has really lagged, and that API for graphics is oftentimes used, like almost all the time, because you can't use DirectX. That's Microsoft.
Yeah.
That's Windows. You can't get DirectX on your Mac unless you boot camp it. But
right. But then what's the point?
That's sort of a separate argument.
Yeah.
And I think last year or maybe it was the year before, Apple came out and they were like, well, now you can use our Metal API, which is like the one we had from mobile, and like it's all going to be together. But people who are developing games for PCs, they don't really want to use that.
Yeah.
Not least of all because if they do, what the heck are you port it to? Like that's going to cause some complications there. And as a result of that, like I think we've seen a lot of games not even bother coming to Mac. I was really surprised Civ 6 came so quickly. That was nice. But like Overwatch, like Blizzard has generally been like a really big supporter of Mac gaming. They have had all their past games on Mac, and they keep updating like World of Warcraft to be compatible. But yeah, Overwatch didn't come to Mac, and they actually said that it was like, yeah, we're not coming to Mac because like it's too difficult to do it right now.
I think they specifically referenced like a lack of hardware that was powerful enough to run the game at, like you can probably run it on, like you were saying, like I was looking at the Mac Pro and it's actually dual AMD Fire Pro D300 is the, which like I don't even know what those chips are. And they said, it wasn't just that, they specifically did reference OpenGL, and they said like the game uses a lot of OpenGL and we can't escape that. Like, because I think the Mac support is at like, everyone else is at like 4.5 or something, and the Mac support is still at like 2.0. Like it just really doesn't support these modern driver features.
Well, and it really doesn't seem like Mac has any desire to go in that direction, at least.
The only thing we've seen recently, and I think we talked about this at one point before, is Molten, which is a Vulkan interpreter for Metal. So it's sort of like this convoluted thing where Vulkan is they've seen a lot of good performance on Linux, and it's something that systems like Linux that don't have DirectX 12 can run games like Doom because they have this new API that works cross-platform. And so there's been a lot of efforts to try and make that work with the Metal API so that you can run Vulkan games on your Mac. But again, like the hardware is lacking. You know, the 460 at, I don't even know what the resolution is on the 15-inch, but it's something like 3,000, just under 3,000 by just under 2,000, and you're not going to be able to run on a 460 at that resolution. Well,
and not to go too far down this because we're going to get into some more stuff about the MacBook, but I can see it from the gaming standpoint of why would they produce this? If Mac's clearly not going to support this, obviously the market for it's going to start dwindling because people if they're really into gaming, they're going to be going over to PC anyway, if they haven't already. I can definitely understand that from the gaming industry. At a certain point, it's just like, nah.
Yeah.
We're just not going to bother.
The market share has been going down on Steam. So, I think it's almost half of what it was like in 2010 because I was looking at some of the old articles about market share with Mac OS. Well, OS 10 at the time. And it's definitely gone down, and it's easy to see why. And it's kind of funny because, of course I'm biased because I'm a PC person, but I see Apple come out and they're like, hey, look at the games you can play on your Apple TV. And I'm like, don't talk to me about that. No.
Bad Apple.
Fix gaming on the Mac so that people can game on, something you probably are far more likely to want to game on.
Yeah, they're really excited about like Minecraft on the Apple TV, and it's like my iPhone has been running Minecraft for like 4 years. Like, what's the what took you so long?
All right, well let's go on to a couple more things here with the new MacBook as we go through this. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in there. If you're watching live on YouTube, we will get to those. Somebody's saying, since when is MacBook equal gaming? Well, we're just kind of talking about what the graphics are and where they're headed with it. All right, so the MacBook Pro. Let's talk about some more internals. The battery. Any improvements on there?
No, it's smaller.
Smaller.
Nope.
So it went worse.
It's much smaller.
It went down.
It's much smaller. So the battery on the old MacBook Pro 13 was about 74 watt hours. I think it was like 74.9, something like that. The one on the new MacBook Pro 13 without the touch bar is like 54 watt hours, and the one with the touch bar is 49 like 0.2. Okay.
So yeah.
So
we've
like
dropped.
30% smaller.
I mean, it's,
Okay. This Spectre has a battery that is 10 watt hours. Well, I think it's like 8 or 9 watt hours larger than the MacBook Pro 13 with touch bar. And I imagine that's going to end up being a little bit of a problem. I mean, they have said the battery life is the same as before. Okay. Cool. But that means you haven't really got any enhancement, and that means they're probably leveraging every single, enhancement from the new processor that they can possibly do to manage to keep battery life the same. And we'll see what happens when we review it, but I gotta say I'm a little bit skeptical that it is actually going to hold up when we're doing, high load battery tests.
yeah.
We'll see. But if they do it, it's going to be through a combination. If they keep the battery life the same, it's going to be a combination of the new processor, Mac OS, enhancements, because they do have an edge there, being able to more carefully control the operating system, and the screen, which they say is supposed to be a lot more efficient than the old one. So
that's how they're stretching the life
Yeah.
out of this thing a little bit more. What they're saying anyway. All right, but overall, the battery doesn't seem to be not a market improvement over it. If not,
Nope. Definitely a downgrade.
Degrading it. Okay, so let's talk about a couple other things with it. Ports. What are we looking at with this? Because they did get thinner, right? They're thinner than the Air. Is that correct?
Yeah, like the Air's thickest point.
Okay. So overall, though, it's around, so about thinner than the Air's thickest point.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are we looking at, though, with the ports on this? With sacrificing some of that space.
You either get 2 or 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports.
Okay.
Which work over Type-C. And
This depending
a
on
headphone
whether
jack.
you upgrade or
The
not?
13-inch without a touch bar has 2.
Okay.
The 13-inch with a touch bar and the 15-inch have 4, 2
Okay.
on each side. And those are your charging ports, too. This is something to note that people have been talking about. Apple used to have these great MagSafe little magnetic chargers, so if somebody steps on your charger or you trip over it, your computer flips over, it doesn't get yanked off the table and destroyed like used to happen, because I used to work in IT and we would often have people come in with MacBooks and MacBook Pros, especially with crunched corners, because it fell off a table, the power yanked it over. And now you don't have that. And Type-C is, it pops out pretty easily, but not, MagSafe, you could just kind of go like that and the thing would come out.
I'm not too that doesn't bother me too much, that loss of MagSafe, although it's kind of like that was a nice thing to have. I think that being able to charge on any port is a good reason to not have it anymore. But having these 4 ports, I mean, it's not like a terrible decision.
Yeah.
Like it's understandable. Like it's going to give the Mac up to 4 extremely quick ports to use in a very wide variety of ways. But, the downside is that buying it right now, you're not going to have a lot of things to plug into that. There was an interview that went up on The Independent this morning with Phil Schiller. Gotta get the name right. And,
I think it's Schiller.
yeah. And anyway, so they were talking about the SD card. And they were like, why don't you have an SD card reader on this? Like, it's Pro. Like, a lot of people like to stick SD cards from cameras into their Mac. And they're like, well, an SD card's kind of awkward because when you plug it in, it sticks halfway out. And it's like, really? Like, that's the reason?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I understand, like, that's not ideal design, but who really cares?
Yeah, and if you plug anything in, it's going to stick out. I mean, especially if they're trying to go for this pro market, and like you said, photographers, and working with video, SD cards are the tools of the trade. That's what you're using. It's easy, pop it out in the field. You don't have to bring out an adapter, because if you're going to have to plug it into an adapter, it's still sticking out of the computer.
Yeah.
That seems like a really, really big oversight.
Would it be so hard to make one, too? Like, I've seen memory card slots where you push it in and it clicks in, and you click it again to pop it out, and then you don't have to. You've got one right there. Yeah, and I do too.
On there, yeah.
Like, it just seems like that'd be an easy solution that design-wise works just fine.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody, I wouldn't be doing the photography and video, but just for me personally, since I do a lot of audio editing and like in the field, like SD cards, it's just pop it out. It's so universal, you can use it on anything. That does seem like an oversight on that end.
To be fair, though, I keep telling people about these Type C ports. They're like, well, I need an adapter for everything. And I'm like, yeah, but the next external hard drive you buy will probably be Thunderbolt 3. And then the next, when you buy another mouse in however long, that's probably going to be Thunderbolt. Like, everything is slowly going to, or wireless.
So
everything is going to start switching over to these ports. And for good reason. They are better ports.
Faster.
They're faster. They're reversible, which solves one of the most infuriating problems with Type A ports. But there's going to be some growing pains on the way to people adopting this standard.
Yeah. All right. Well, so there we go. That's what we're looking at for the ports. Let's talk about the price, and we'll wrap up too with some more questions. So if you do have any other questions you want to get in there about the new MacBooks, as we're going through, kind of wrapping up the review. Price-wise, there was somebody that put something in here talking about the price. Mark said, obviously the MacBooks seem overpriced, but you think the price is justified considering how long MacBooks last?
People always say this, that MacBooks last a really long time, but in my experience working with them from an IT standard, the deal was sort of that if someone brought in a Windows computer that wasn't working correctly, you could spin it around on the counter and you could type in some things, you could look up some fixes, reboot it, reinstall something, and hand it back to them. And if someone brought in a Mac that wasn't working, you'd hit the power button and it would, the screen would flicker, and you'd close the lid and put it in a box and send it off to Apple, and they'd send it back a week later with a replaced part. If you have the Apple support, it's a really nice thing for some people, and it's worth paying for. Like my parents, if they don't know how to use their computer, they can drive to the mall and walk into the Apple store, and somebody will sit down with them and show them how to do something. And if you buy a Dell or an HP, you can't do that. You can't. You could maybe bring it to the Microsoft store, and if someone's feeling nice, they might help you, but it's not their job. There isn't someone dedicated to that, and they're used to that. Carries a premium with it, I think, and that makes sense. But this is starting to turn into more than just a premium, because if you bought, for $1,500 the base model Touch Bar MacBook Pro 13, for $1,500 you're getting a really nice XPS 13 or one of these Spectres. The pricing has become so much more aggressive.
For
on
the
these
comparison
computers.
for that, for the folks who are watching the video, we have HP Spectre X360. Okay, this has Core i7 7500U, 512 gigabyte solid state drive, PCI Express, NVMe. It is touchscreen, 2-in-1 convertible. It's same size and weight. Actually, I think it weighs maybe a tad less than the MacBook Pro 13. And it has 16 gigs of RAM. And it's $1,300. The only thing that's really disadvantaged compared to that is the display is 1080p, so it's not quite as high resolution. But I mean, wow! That's you're getting just a lot more of everything for less. And so Brad's right, you get that premium, and you're paying that for a reason. Mm-hmm. But let's not forget, this is a $200 price increase over the preceding model. So it's not like you didn't get that before when you were paying $1,300 for your MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Now you're just paying more.
Before
and it's
it
not
was
really clear why.
Yeah.
Before it was a flat premium, and now it seems like it's a scaling premium. That it was you pay an extra $200, $300 on your computer purchase, no matter what the price point is, and you're getting this. But now it's hard to justify these. And at like you're saying, at $1,300, you don't get much on the MacBook.
And that's the base.
There. They just changed it. You get a dual core i5, 8 gigs of memory, 128 gig solid state drive, and the 2 ports, and you don't even get the Touch Bar, which is the whole. Thing
right. That's
so
the whole big.
If you pay for the Touch Bar, you pay $1,800 for that. For that same
a lot
price,
of money for a Touch Bar.
For that same price, you could get the new Razer Blade, which is a 13-inch system. Now again, 1080p display, so it's not quite as high resolution. But what you're getting instead is a quad-core processor as opposed to a dual-core, and you're getting NVIDIA GTX 1060 graphics,
which is VR ready.
Which is it's just takes the Iris, and just grabs it by the collar and throws it across the room, out the window, and that's just so much better. And it's kind of okay, that's the premium is kind of crazy. And I think also the iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. iPhone 7, expensive phone, but it's not really that much more expensive than a Samsung Galaxy. Mm-hmm. Not really that much more expensive than a Pixel. Obliterates the performance of both of those in benchmarks. Just destroys it. The display's not quite as nice, but it's camera is very nice.
Yeah.
Has
You're getting your money's worth out of it.
the iPhone is a very expensive phone, and I didn't really want to pay as much for it as I did. But at the same time, it's like you look around and you're like, okay, if I want that level of stuff, I kind of have to pay that,
Right.
one way or another. But that's not true with a Mac, and that's kind of like why I think people are not happy about it. Like the iPhone 7 comes out, there's always going to be people who are going to be like, ha ha ha, look at it, it looks the same, whatever. But I think it's different with the new Macs. I think people are kind of like really raising their eyebrow because they already were.
Because you're paying this much, but it's not the.
And just wondering like where this is going. Like I don't want the Mac to not be competitive. Like we don't want Microsoft to just be kind of out there being like, ha ha, like again, But right now it's like I don't know, like. Where are they going with this? Like, what is the plan, like, 5 years from now with Mac OS and the MacBook?
Right. At this price level, it is interesting to see where they're going to go. I know we've got a couple more questions here just to get in really quick, and then we'll need to wrap up. But I've got Brennan here. He said, I'm just going to read what his question is. I'm wondering if it's worth upgrading the processor to 3.1 gigahertz from 2.9 for an extra $100. Would I see a significant boost in performance when editing?
No, probably not.
Okay.
I mean... That's always like with $100 price increment. It's kind of like a very okay sort of thing. It's like, will you see an extra boost in performance? Yeah, you will. Will it be much? No, it probably won't be much.
Yeah.
Is that worth $100 to you? I mean, considering it's already a $1,500 to $1,800 system, maybe.
Yeah, maybe $100 at that point.
But there's not really like an easy recommendation there. It's kind of like it's probably worth about $100. You're not getting a great deal. But it's not a terrible deal either.
You might even, and $100 too might buy you a bigger hard drive. That might be something that would be, to move from 128 to 256 gig might be a more apt update for $150.
Let's see, we've got another one here. As someone who uses my current late 2013 MacBook heavily for development, I'm concerned about the keyboard. Is the second gen Butterfly keyboard any good?
Unfortunately, I have not been able to try it myself because the event was in New York. Well, not the event that we got our hands on time with was at New York. So we were in Portland, and I didn't personally get to do it. Now, from what I heard from Mallory, who did get to try it, it does seem rather similar to the MacBook, maybe a little better. That is an area of concern that I didn't bring up today because I haven't tried it myself. But yeah, like it might not be great.
I could say there is a good review. Mallory did write talking about the keyboard at digitaltrends.com, so you can go there too and take a look at her
hands-on. We have a video and everything of it. So
it seemed to be. She seemed to like it. Again, overall, I think that seemed to be something that she was okay with. I guess I'll let you read it and interpret what she thinks on that. But yeah, you can check that out at digitaltrends.com. All right, any final questions that we have? Go ahead and put those in there. Final impressions from you guys on this MacBook Pro.
I think the MacBook Pro over the last few years has become a computer for creatives on the go. That's sort of the area they're targeting: photographers, video editors, musicians, that kind of thing. And it feels like, in a way, these changes that they're making are alienating that customer base right now. Whether that's going to continue, I don't know. I had someone who does music production being like, well, they took all my ports I use. And it's like, yeah, but high-end music gear is going to go to Thunderbolt 3. Like, it's a very high bandwidth, very, it brings a lot of power. And that I think is something that, in the next few years you're going to see a lot of. And that music production is going to go that direction.
But right now,
it is kind of a problem. Again, this is part of the growing pains with these ports and with the design. Is that, like Thunderbolt 3 in 5 years or 10 years is going to be everywhere, and you're going to be mad when your computer doesn't have it. But for now, it's sort of this very forward-looking thing. It's like buying a hybrid car when they weren't doing that well in terms of actually making you back money. It was just saying, like, I'm committed to this. I want to make sure that I do this, ahead of time. And, by the time Thunderbolt 3 is more prolific, I have a feeling there will be another MacBook Pro update. So
perhaps.
Matt, your final thoughts on this?
We're going to be getting Mac to review sometime in the next 2 weeks or so. And, In the past, we reviewed Macs quite well. Although that started to take a turn with the MacBook 12, which I was kind of like, I don't know. And certainly since then, if you're looking for something that size, we've ended up sort of recommending the Asus ZenBook 3, things like that, although they came out later, have proven to be the better option. So with the new MacBook Pros, I'd say that it's leaning towards being disappointing. Big problem with it is that we went so long with an update that without an update that people were, I think, looking to have something that's really going to knock their socks off. And it wasn't really that,
Yeah.
This, again, like this isn't an iPhone where we get an update every year, and even then people are like, they want like
Right,
a new
there's still not
design
gonna be
every
wow,
year,
there's gonna
but
be- yeah.
but this is something that hadn't been updated, in like 4 years.
Yeah.
And so it just didn't quite, come out and deliver that.
That punch.
It just doesn't seem like a cutting edge laptop in a lot of regards. It seems like a pretty good laptop, perhaps, but
Not a Mac or an
so
Apple.
so we'll have to see how that shakes out. I mean, it probably will be pretty good, but I don't know.
Okay.
We'll have to see.
Okay. Well, there we go. That's kind of the review so far of what we know about the MacBook and the internal workings of it. And this is our show Close to the Metal. So if you're just tuning in on YouTube, we do have this as an audio podcast as well. So please subscribe on iTunes or however you get your podcasts. You can find it there. And we've got a lot of back episodes of this, both video and podcasts, that we talk about different aspects. Please go back, take a look at those, scroll through. You can see what the subjects are. Maybe it's something that you'd be interested in talking about. You can always leave questions too on the video or send us an email, podcast@digitaltrends.com, and we'll make sure that we get back to you on those and let you know about it. I think that's it for today. So we'll be back next week. We do this live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, live here from Portland at DT headquarters here, and we will be back next week with another episode.